Welcome to the Dr. Joe Show, where we learn about women's health and sexual wellness. Our guest today is Katy Faust. And Katy, I will let you give a little background on yourself and we can start the conversation.
Yeah, I'm in Seattle. I'm married to a pastor. I've got four kids. The youngest is adopted from China. And that's really all that I wanted to be. But then the whole marriage debate started in 2012. And what I heard proponents of gay marriage saying was that kids don't care if they have two moms or two dads. Um, they just need to be safe and loved. And I had been working with kids for a couple decades. And when you say kids don't care if they've got two moms or two dads, what that means is kids don't care if they've lost their mom or dad. And that just wasn't true. The kids that I worked with, the people that I've talked to in ministry and youth ministry, they would say that some of their deepest wounds are losing their mom or dad, especially kids, especially teens that we were working with.
Mhm.
So I started writing and to kind of confront that lie that moms and dads are optional in the lives of kids. And that was the beginning of kind of writing and researching and digging into all of these marriage and family issues. I started working for Katy Faust, which is a grassroots marriage movement that equips women and men all across the globe really to study the issues around sex, marriage, gender, religious liberty from a natural law perspective. And then eventually I started a nonprofit to defend the rights of children to be known and loved by their own mother and father. And just came out with a book titled Them Before Us, which is also the name of the nonprofit. So yeah, I've got my hands in a lot of different jars, cookie jars, when it comes to the marriage and family conversation.
Excellent. Well, sounds like all great work and very important, needed work in this day and age, especially. And
Yeah.
probably even more so in the Seattle area with everything that's been going on there. Let me ask you this. This is going to go out to hopefully a whole lot of college age women.
Mm,
First of all, thinking back to your younger years, what was your
mm.
college age experience like? And can you just kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't raised in a Christian home. I did not have that kind of foundation at all.
Hmm.
So um, I lead conversations for Canavox for teens, teen girls, and I just tell them really openly, I was an idiot in high school, a total idiot. Um, and so that was very much true when it came to guys and dating and things like that. I became a Christian when I was a junior in high school, and I was still an idiot after that. It took another year or so of making major mistakes with guys before I got it together. And then I went to college, and day three of like freshman orientation, my husband comes down the hall to tell this really loud girl to just kind of like be quiet. Like, who is this girl down the hall? It was just, oh my gosh, he can't even focus, right? And then he walks in to say, he walks in like, hey, can you hi, right? So that's kind of how that happened. And so he and I dated through most of college. Um, and we learned a lot. We learned a lot about dating and about how to do relationships well. And then we got married right after college. And then we still needed a lot of guidance because both of us had come from divorced families. And so we didn't have a lot of healthy marriage models in our lives. So thankfully, every church we went to, there would be a few couples that would just tell us, don't do that. Or hey, if you're gonna be if you're gonna keep your marriage healthy, Katy, don't ever say that kind of thing about your husband in front of other people again. That's something
Hmm.
you need to talk to him about alone. And he had men who would say, look, this is what being a good husband looks like. And so we needed a lot of on the ground kind of practical support, both in our dating life and in our marriage life. Thankfully, excuse me, we've been married. Let me see, what year is it? Is it 2021? We've been married almost 23 years. And I think we have a great marriage. Great marriage means we've gone through highs and lows and we are still married and we
Right.
still like each other. So that's what great marriage means, is like just that stick to itiveness, the willingness to hold on, even though you go through, like they literally put for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, in the vows for a reason, because you will encounter all of those things. And it's only that stick to it, that grit, that commitment that's going to get you through to the other side. So, yeah, like we had a lot to learn when we were young about how to do dating and marriage and family right. Thank God there were good people with timeless principles to kind of help us figure it out.
Hmm. Well, looking back on it, would you have done it any differently? Would you, like today's young women, the typical age of marriage is 27, 28, I believe. Would you have got waited to get married later, or would you recommend the right after college approach?
Yeah, we were both 22 and I loved it. It was
Okay.
great. But I will also say that we were both really eager to have a family. Like, I was connected to my mom and dad after their divorce, and I had a good relationship with both of them all my life, thank God.
Hmm.
You know, he did not. His parents divorced when he was 3. He did not have um, the same level of kind of connectedness, and both of us were eager to be the parents of the families that we wish we had when we were kids.
Wonderful.
Um, yeah, and so I actually even remember my husband when we were dating, he would say, "I'm not playing around." Like, if you're if you're somebody that would even consider divorce, do you understand that if we get married, we're never getting divorced? I'm never ever going to do that to my kids. So are you in this for real or not? And my response was, "Totally, you're hot. I'll do whatever." You know, I mean, like, I was
Not
not.
thinking beyond the moment.
No, I wasn't. I mean, thank God we both had a deep commitment to Christ, and a pretty good indicator that you've got a stabilizing force, and then that grants you with shared values, which is going to help you get over the hurdles. Um, so, I think that was enough. We had the willingness to stick it out. We had a devotion to God, and we have allowed that spark. There's that C.S. Lewis kind of talks about the spark that starts the engine. That's kind of that infatuation and love feeling. But the spark that starts the engine doesn't get you from Seattle to Nashville, right? You need
Right.
some other kind of sustaining love. And that is the agape, the sacrificial love, right? So we had people shepherd us through, what does it look like to get beyond that spark of infatuation into the more sturdy, durable agape love that's going to get you hopefully to 50 or 60 or 70 years of marriage.
Right. Well, yeah, I'll note for the record that my wife and I got married. I was almost 21 and she was almost 20. And
Mhm.
I was just still in my senior year of football, uh, college. I played football, but we'll have had 44 years in June. So the woman's a saint for
Mm,
putting up with me all these years. But I would
yeah.
agree with everything that you're saying. We had some really good mentors along the way, and I don't regret it at all. I don't regret the us marrying that stage and growing. Really, we really grew up
Yeah.
together and grew together. Rather than maybe coming in with more hardwired personalities already that had gone into the 20s, into even into the maybe early 30s. A lot of young people are waiting to these days. So I appreciate those words of wisdom, and I agree with them. um I think I know the answer to this question already, but looking back on yourself as a college woman, what would you want that woman to know that you know now, as a woman where you're at?
Oh man. Good job, Dr. Joe. You're going in places that I I don't have like
I'm a
the automatic
psychologist as
answers
well.
for.
No,
I love it. What would I have done differently?
or what would you have
You
wanted
know,
yourself to know?
yeah, sexual restraint is worth it. I
Hmm.
think that's one. Um, and we muddled through. We made it across barely dragging ourselves across the finish line. But that was worth it. Because you kind of play around the edges. But when you're really looking at like dating as a preparation for marriage, it is such a blip on the radar when it comes to the length of your relationship, that it is worth um preparing yourself well, right? Practicing and exercising restraint, because the funny thing is, when you get to marriage, it's not a free for all, right? You're still needing to practice and exercise restraint. And so it's great to have that skill, like heading into marriage. Um, and then I would say focus on probably a little more depth of character. Like make yourself the right person before marriage. You know what I mean? Like I think a
Mm,
lot of times we were so eager to get married that we kept looking forward, which is wonderful, and saying, okay, that's the ultimate. Once we get there, everything's going to be okay, or that's the thing that we're waiting for, which is wonderful. But still, do the hard work of like the taking stock internally, developing righteousness and strong characteristics within yourself, because ultimately a husband is incredible, but he is not going to fix everything in your life.
mhm.
So focus on those internal characteristics of yourself. I probably could have done a little more of that.
Okay. Well, again, it sounds like you've come a long way, and I could not say the same thing about myself. I have feet of clay, actually, probably all the way from the hips down of clay. So I've had to learn a lot of things by the school of hard knocks and hard experiences. So, but that's what we're here for, is to, on this particular Dr. Joe show, is to talk about what we can help this younger generation learn that will help them not to have to get some of the school of hard knocks treatment. Um, Another question I have for you. I'm sure you've heard of the hookup culture. What would be your thoughts on the hookup culture? What advice would you give to young women today along that line?
Yeah. So at Canavox, we study the hookup culture. And one of the things that I get to do at Canavox is develop materials for our teen reading groups. And so I've written a letter on the hookup culture. And so it's really helpful to think of it, I think, in economic terms. Mark Regnerus has done this a lot at the Austin Institute. He wrote a book called Cheap Sex. And so he
Read it.
looks at kind of, yeah, it's so good. So he's looked at it in terms of like an economic model. So if sex is the commodity, um, like the price used to be pretty high to get sex. What did men have to do to get sex? Well, they had to woo, they had to be able to provide, they had to exercise self restraint, they had to get to know your family, they had to demonstrate a pretty solid character. And then they had to devote their entire life to that woman in front of all of their family and friends for life. And so the price of sex used to be really high.
Hmm.
Now there's still a very high demand for sex, but the price is really low because you can get sex in so many places for so very little
Right.
today. You can get it, hooking up on a campus. You can get it by choosing to pay half the rent for however long, or you can just get it, by swiping right. And so I think that the biggest thing that women can do is price themselves high in the marketplace. I know it's really difficult because you are competing against a lot of people who are pricing sex really low. But not everybody wants cheap sex.
Right.
So you've got to be the person that prices themselves high, influence your peers, right, to also set the price very high for sex. Because the truth is that lots of women pricing themselves high actually is going to change the market dynamic when it comes to the price of sex. Um, I've had friends that have done it both ways, where they've offered cheap sex and then they've offered, you know, properly valued sex, which is no sex until the guy devotes his entire life to them. And the result is you actually increase your power in the relationship by pricing yourself high, right? You get to set the terms for the relationship a lot of the time. And the other thing that happens is you actually change the behavior of the men that you're with, right? By demanding more of them, you change their behavior, right? They increase their wooing efforts, they discipline themselves more. And then the other thing that's really incredible about this is um, they actually desire you more, right? You've got something that they have to chase and they have to pursue. And I love men. So I don't want to make it sound like men are these sexual animals, these beasts that are just cravenous. But the reality is that men value what they work for, and they will work for what they value.
Hmm.
So be the kind of woman that a guy has to work for, and your value in his eyes will increase. So um, that I think is kind of a helpful way to think about sex when it comes to how you should price yourself in the marketplace. Be that be the one that sets your value very, very high, and then watch and see what guys are willing to meet it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And see, my PhD is in the biochemistry behind the truth of what you're saying. And so
Yeah.
there's this chemical, and it's not the only one, but it's the main male bonding chemical is vasopressin, and
Mhm.
it does not set up. I don't know if you're how familiar if you're familiar at all with it, but it does not set up, and the receptors aren't created if sex is given cheaply, like you're describing.
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
only sets up if a young woman follows the course of action you're prescribing, and there's time there where the gentleman is sexually attracted to her, and but again they're not having sexual relationships, and so eventually it's the bonding takes place, and the young man, as we say, falls in love. So the falling in love process basically requires, biochemically in humans, it requires, in most cases, what you're describing. So
Mhm.
um, one of our a woman that I work with posted basically what we're talking about, the vasopressin process, to TikTok, and
Mhm.
ended up getting 3.6 million hits on it, and I don't know, 600,000 I think likes. So there's there's definitely a lot of young women out there, I think, that uh you know they understand the truth of what you're saying. They may not understand the chemistry behind it, but it all adds up to being the truth on a biological level, as well as an ethical level, and just a practical level, basically. So yeah, so um yes, that's a message I've been trying to give, and of course all the other, mostly women that I'm working with, are trying to echo it as well.
Mhm.
So another question for you. Um, as far as these young women and marriage, do you think that, again, a lot of them, at least some of them, are choosing not to get married, going into the future, or they're really putting their professional career in a much more important position than marriage? How would you relate the two, as far as where you're at now in your life? How important is marriage versus career?
Well, I do think that young women can have it all, but you can't have it all at once.
Mm,
Okay. And the reality is that once you have kids, most women desire to stay home with their kids. I have known so many career oriented women that have gotten pregnant and said, "Oh, I'm just going to do 6 weeks maternity leave. And then bam, I'm going to be back at the office." Right. They have the baby and they go, "Whoa, I want to be with this kid all the time." And so something shifts in you when you become a mom, right? To say, "This, I actually want to reorient my life around being with my kids." So recognize that even if you don't have a lot of family aspirations right now, I actually was not one of those women that like really wanted babies. I wanted to get married, but I was like, I don't really know if I want kids. Like, I actually didn't want, I really didn't, this is so terrible. I didn't want any of my kids until I was holding them. Right. So, like, even while I was pregnant, I was like, "Oh, why are you doing this to my body? I don't know who you are, but you better be worth this." And then they put the baby in my arms and I'm like, "Oh yeah, we can totally make this work." And then something in you just says, "And now I want to orient my life around this little baby." And so especially when your kids are young, you need to have the kind of flexibility to let your world get a little bit smaller. Now, here's something, young ladies, listen to me. Your body is wired for pregnancy in its 20s. It will be it can be very difficult to get pregnant when you are over 35 and even in your early 30s. You're wired for baby making when you are 20. And a lot of what I deal with now, as a children's rights activist, is combating the harms to children through reproductive technologies. Okay, specifically sperm and egg donation, which always separates children from one of their biological parents and genuinely harms them because of it. The harms are outrageous. But even if you're just doing kind of IVF, just doing IVF, those kinds of technologies are have very low success rates. They tend to be hard on your body. They are not child friendly. So you don't want to get to the point where you have to turn to the medical world to help you have kids, which is something that very likely you will desperately want at some point in your life. So keep it in mind, if you want to pursue a career and you want to have a family, do your family first. And, the good news is there's lots of ways to kind of fit a career into your world while you're a mom. Maybe not in the first year or two of your kid's life, but I have found really creative ways to kind of fit what I'm doing into the space around my kids and around, the world of my family. And that's exactly how I want it. I don't want to have to fit my kids into my career, right? My career is going to fit in around my kids. And if you don't understand what I'm saying now, you will. When you have a kid, you will.
Yeah, yeah. That again, my research background is heavily in all of the things you're talking about, and so that's why I'm so adamant about you know championing what you're talking about, even though I'm not a woman. I know all the,
Hmm.
I know all the science behind it. Speaking of which, if you don't mind me asking a personal question, did you breastfeed your children?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, the
Yes.
reason I'm asking that
Yeah, I
reason.
did.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I did with all three of my the children I gave birth to. And then when we adopted our son who was almost 2, I bottle fed him almond milk for about 2 years, nap time and bedtime, to try to create a bond with him. He was in an institution for almost 2 years, and so we really struggled to create that attachment. What a gift. What a gift breastfeeding is to mother and child in terms of setting the foundation for healthy connection all throughout life. So
Right.
if you can breastfeed, it's just a gift.
Yes, and there's that hormonal process we're talking
Yeah.
about, because
Mhm.
there's hormonal processes that underlie all of these things that you're recommending, and of course I'm backing you on. And there's a basically this life stage process and these hormonal life courses that we're on, that when you're saying that don't necessarily wait to get pregnant later rather than sooner. There's a,
Mhm.
as you say, the peak age for fertility for women is 19 to 29 years old.
Mhm.
And so again, there's probably a message there as far as what should be happening during that time period. And again, all these different things, this there's a hormonal situation going on behind hookup culture that's a negative one, especially for the
Yep.
women.
Mhm.
There's a hormonal process behind romance, which is a positive one, especially for the women, but also for the men. And then there's a hormonal process behind pregnancy and forming a family, and how the husband relates to the wife and the wife relates to the husband. What happens with the husband's
Yeah.
testosterone levels when he commits to a woman, and
Mhm.
then what happens even further to them, where they drop when children come along. It's a
Yeah.
process that I think you would agree with me. I believe God, intended it to be this way. And if you're out there and you don't believe in God, nature intended it to be this way. So it really works out
Yeah.
I think, for the well-being, really, especially of the women, because the women are the ones, I think, that have the women. And then your point with Them Before Us, which is the organization you head up now, your point is that it's very good for the children too. Would you mind talking about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. In fact, I'll just piggyback on what you said. Women cannot help but be connected to their children. They are literally living in us for the first 9.5 months. There's no way to get away from that. And then God or nature, however you want to think about that, um, actually wires women and babies to stay connected to one another through the breastfeeding process, through just mom's natural response system to when the baby is in distress, to pick them up and put them right by their chest. I mean, women do that dozens of times a day with distressed babies or tired babies or frightened babies. And this is just so incredible to me, right? When a baby is in distress, their cortisol level goes up, right? The stress hormone. Babies have no central nervous system. They have no way of lowering their own stress level. The
Hmm.
only thing that does that is oxytocin. And babies can't release oxytocin on their own. Only skin to skin contact will release oxytocin in babies. And so babies that don't have enough time with their mothers, especially in the first year and a half of life, have a hard time with emotional regulation because they've missed that window on having somebody else help them with emotional regulation before they can then emotionally regulate themselves. So there's all of these systems set up to keep mom and baby connected to one another. How do you connect the father to the baby? Because moms and dads are equally important to kids. Moms are required physically to be connected to baby. And then there's all of these chemical, hormonal connectors with mom and baby. And so every society throughout history has struggled with this. How do you connect dad to baby? How do you connect dad to baby? Because there's no cord attaching dad to baby when the baby's born. Dad doesn't breastfeed the baby, you know, so he does not benefit in the same way as mom does with a chemical bond. And fascinatingly, nearly every culture and nearly every religion throughout history has come up with the same solution
Hmm.
of making sure that dad is connected to baby. And they have found that if dad commits to mom, dad is connected to baby. And so marriage is the solution that every culture and nearly every religion has come up with to make sure that dad is connected to baby for life. When you connect dad to mom for life, you connect dad to baby for life.
Hmm.
And so what we've seen now is this breakdown of the marriage culture has resulted in a wave of fatherless children. You know, we have had a 400% increase in out of wedlock births since the 60s. Now 40.5% of kids are growing up without their father in their life. Um, Only 13% of Black children will make it to their high school graduation living only with their mother and father, married biological mother and father. We are starving children. We are starving children of the necessary ingredients for a thriving life. And at Them Before Us, we talk about there's three staples of a child's social emotional diet: mother's love, father's love, and stability. Those social emotional staples are only found in one relationship, and that is the home of their own married mother and father. So at Them Before Us, we focus on advocating for children's rights to be known and loved by their mother and father. We understand marriage as a social justice issue for children, that this really is like, you don't get, my dear, dear friends on the left, I tell them, you don't get anything that you want. You don't get reduced rates of child poverty, reduced child homelessness, reduced teen pregnancy, reduced teen suicide, increased academic performance. You get nothing. You don't get lower incarceration rates. You don't get anything you want unless you can defend children's rights to their own mother and father, because fatherless kids overpopulate all those demographics that you're trying to address. And to my friends on the right, I say, you don't get anything you want unless you can defend children's rights to their own mother and father. You don't get low taxes. You don't get small government. You don't get personal responsibility, right? Because when fathers are gone, the state becomes its very sorry, inadequate, and expensive replacement. The problem is that the state cannot love a child, right? Only the mom and dad can do that. So we really think that all conversations about marriage and family need to revolve around children's rights to their mother and father. And the incredible thing is, when you do that, you mend the hearts of children and you mend all of society as well.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. You should be a preacher, by the way,
Oh, we already
because
have one of those in the house, so I have to do something else.
it's very effective, the way you communicate. So, and unfortunately, running up on time here, but is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think would be important for these young women to hear from you?
Oh, hmm.
And if there
Well,
isn't,
I
that's
think,
you've already said a lot of
yeah,
important things.
yeah. In your personal life, I think that you actually can be what we call at Canavox an undercover agent for good, where you carry these ideals and these principles around in your everyday life, and that actually can have a transformational effect on the world around you. And then in the realm of public policy, I would say join us at Them Before Us. You can go to the website thembeforeus.com. The book is a field manual on how to look at every marriage and family issue through the lens of children's rights. It's a very demanding perspective because it demands personal responsibility. It demands that adults do hard things. It demands that our public policy emphasize and recognize that children are the ultimate victims when we get questions about marriage and family wrong, and that we should prioritize their rights. So I just, I tell people all the time, no one's going to do any of this for you. Your celebrities won't, your politicians won't. Academia isn't going to, nobody has the courage to stand up for these principles. It's pretty much you have to do it. And that's the good news, is like, I really do think that we've got kind of a wave army of ordinary adults who are willing to do the hard things that influencers and politicians don't have the courage to do.
Right. Well, I would agree. I would agree with you, and that's my hope. My hope is that
Mhm.
people like yourself, people like me, and hopefully some those listening to us will join us in this, because that's ultimately, we can do a certain amount of good, but the generations coming behind us need to have this fire as well, and they need to not only the fire, the wisdom as well. So, Katy Faust, very nice to talk with you, and more than nice, it was an honor to speak with you, and I hope that we can work together going into the future.
Oh, I'd love it. Thanks for having me. And I'm so grateful that that these young women are hearing your voice, because there's a lot of other voices talking to them, and most of them are lying to them.
Agreed. Agreed. So, hopefully, we'll just continue on into the future, and the this movement that we're working on will grow.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Katie. Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks.
Bye bye.